Welcome to Keep Smiling, the e-commerce customer experience podcast. Selling products online is challenging and can lead to poor customer experiences. Each episode, we explore how entrepreneurs and organizations in e-commerce are delivering delightfully unexpected experiences to their shoppers and customers. Amazon, Shopify, artificial intelligence. We'll discuss what matters today and what you can do to build a better e-commerce business. We'll show you how. Hello, listeners, and thank you again for tuning in. I'm your host, Ty Walters, and joining me today, as always, is my co-host, Michael Melgar.
Hey guys, thanks for joining us.
Michael, we're honored today to have one of our team members on the podcast for the first time, Lynn Zarcone. Thank you for joining us.
Hi guys, glad to be here.
Lynn is our process design lead at SellerSmile. She's in charge of helping us get from point A to point B as quickly as possible. So whenever we have a really challenging project or task, she's in charge of creating processes that will help us work through that project as efficiently as we can. Her background includes working as a store manager at an Apple Premier Provider store named PeachMac, and working as a vet tech most recently at a local veterinary office in Vinings, Georgia. Lynn and I go way back. We have a very similar customer service background, starting in brick-and-mortar stores. She was actually the store manager to train me during my time at PeachMac. And, we both have an appreciation for companies that provide excellent customer service. We geek out about it all the time on Slack. We decided to bring her onto the show today because she has a lot to say on the topic.
To further that introduction, Michael, you and I know we made quite a few interviews during our first round of hiring, and Lynn stood out well above and beyond any of the other candidates. A lot of quality candidates, of course, but there's something special about Lynn, and I think Lynn had kind of the sixth sense of customer service. She gets it, and she has a lot of experience with it, which is why we're really glad to have her on today.
Sixth sense of customer service, so like I see dead customers?
I think that's the title. That's the title, the sixth sense of customer service.
I see dead customers.
But it's true. A really good customer service agent or team member or manager, it's almost like they have this extra gene that makes them really good at communication. And that's really what stood out to us a lot about Lynn and her ability to organize really complex projects is kind of what puts her in the position that she's in today. But she has a lot to say about brick and mortar and about customer service in general. E-commerce is a pretty new concept to her over the last year.
The inspiration for this episode was something that Lynn brought to us. She had a certain customer experience at one of her local stores, and she wanted to talk about it in the sense that she had this kind of epiphany that there's something that is universal about customer service, whether it's inside of a physical store or whether it's online from Amazon or another e-commerce store. That led to certain discussions and kind of coming up with an outline of this idea. And to envision this idea, imagine a Venn diagram. On one circle or one side, you have brick and mortar customer service and everything that includes. The other circle of that diagram is e-commerce customer service. What is unique and distinct about that situation? But there's a certain area in the middle where there's an overlap. Brick and mortar and e-commerce customer service share certain aspects and elements. To us, this was a very interesting idea because it offered a more holistic idea of what customer service is today. It's a blend of in-store and online, but also what it could be and how it could be better. So tentatively, the title of this episode is E-commerce Customer Service versus Brick and Mortar. To add some more context to the idea of this episode, we all know that brick and mortar is declining. The quarterly retail e-commerce sales report from the U.S. Census Bureau News reported that in 2019, at least in the first quarter, online e-commerce sales represented over 10% of total retail sales. This has been on a steady linear incline since the rise of e-commerce, since the birth of e-commerce, as compared to what it was in 2009. So just 10 years ago, e-commerce or online retail sales represented only 4% of total retail. So it's a rising force. It's a force that we operate our business within every day, and reflecting on what it used to be, what customer service was back when it was only brick and mortar. What can we learn from those times, those days, and bring them forward into how we perform our duties on behalf of our clients?
I would even say that it holds relevancy today because I still hear about regular everyday shoppers who decide to go to a brick and mortar store over buying online. And those are some of the reasons that we're going to be exploring in our next couple of episodes. But In particular, there's a lot of lessons to be learned from brick and mortar customer service because it's one of the main differentiating factors between whether someone decides to shop online or someone decides to make a trip to their local store.
So to give you some more context, even more context to this episode, Michael, Lynn, and I are around the same age, spanning from maybe 26 to early 30s, 32 to be exact. I'm the oldest. But what that means is that we grew up in an age where it was uncommon to have a cell phone or to go shopping online when we needed things. And today, of course, we operate in that world professionally, but we're also consumers, just like everyone else is, of online shopping, Amazon especially. So the outline of today's episode looks like this. We're going to talk about the first side of the Venn diagram. What is unique and what is distinct about brick and mortar customer service? We're going to be talking about some of the things that we got together and thought about, and also recall some personal experiences because we've all had professional experience in brick and mortar customer service. Part 2 of this episode, we're going to transition to the other side of the Venn diagram. We're going to talk about e-commerce customer service. What is unique and distinct to that world? And from that, we're going to be pulling from our experience of what we've been doing for the last 2 years with SellerSmile. And part 3 of this episode, we're going to cover what is in common between those two sides of the diagram. How do they overlap and why? Because if we can consider what they have in common, I think we can use some of our wisdom gained and pull some of the best lessons learned from brick and mortar customer service and make sure that we're doing them to the best of our ability in an online world.
And in part 2 of this series, we'll actually go into more of the in-depth ways that we can take lessons from brick and mortar customer service for your e-commerce business.
Excellent, guys. So let's start with part 1. Let's start by talking about brick and mortar customer service. Let's list some of the ways and elaborate on why we thought brick and mortar was unique in certain senses. The first topic that we covered was experiential marketing. This is when you're actually getting up close and personal with the product. Maybe you can see it, touch it, and feel it. Let's talk about some of those differences in greater detail.
Yeah. So the differences in brick and mortar versus e-commerce, obviously, when you walk into a store, it's going to look different, right? So experiential marketing and physical presentation, the physical presentation of a customer-facing store has to do not only with the product itself, and where you place things, how you display things, how you make them look appealing to the customer, but also the people that you're interacting with. If you look at places, if you compare different brick and mortar stores, say Walmart and Nordstrom, when you go in and you meet someone and you're looking for somebody that, because you have a question, right? That's where the customer service comes in. The customer's coming in because they have a problem or they have a question and they need your help. When you walk into Nordstrom, the presentation is someone dressed, if it's a gentleman, it's a suit and tie. Ladies have to wear skirts. They have to all be professionally dressed, representing their brand. They have to be well groomed. And of course, Nordstrom they help them with this. If you go into Walmart, they definitely represent their brand as being of a more casual atmosphere than a more formal atmosphere and professional in the sense that you go there to buy luxury goods. You don't buy luxury goods at Walmart.
We're talking about what's unique about brick and mortar, a physical location, being in the same room with the products. That's different because when you're shopping online, obviously it's a browser, it's your laptop or your phone. In this case, the main difference is your potential customer, your shopper, is in the same room with the products, with you and the products, or at least your team. And the difference here could be, how does that affect the ability to give great customer service? In a store, you're making designs and you're stacking your products to be fun and cool with them, or you're putting bows and ribbons on them. This is all going to affect the way your customers perceive and interact with the products, of course. The store has to be clean, well lit, and of course, how your team and employees walk, talk, dress, and act. All of these things are the aspects or the characteristics unique to brick and mortar. We don't see those literally online.
Yes, specifically, and most importantly, I think it is less important because you can make a product look good online. You can take high quality photos. You can do all that kind of stuff. So the presentation can look really good. But when it comes to customer service and the need for customer service, customer asking a question or having an issue, it really has to do with the physical presentation of the store representative and how they are representing their brand. When I walk up to someone who greets me with a smile and looks clean and professional and like they actually want to help me, it's a completely different representation than if I have to hunt somebody down, physically tap them on the shoulder to get them to notice me, and they look like I am the biggest inconvenience to them in the entire world.
You're interrupting them.
Exactly.
They don't want to be doing this right now.
It's interesting because that physical presentation is almost a form of proactive customer service because, as you were saying, Lynn, the fact that the gentleman, the lady at the store is well-dressed, well-groomed, smiles at you, they have a welcoming presence. It's almost this automatic notion that it's okay if I have a question, or it's okay if I don't know what I'm looking for and I can approach them with my question.
Yes.
That's exactly it. And I think that we talk about like the white glove, people who look professionally groomed and all that kind of stuff at Nordstrom or Von Maur or these luxury department stores. But guys, when I walk into a Vans store or a Hot Topic, I tell you, I get great customer service at Hot Topic because those people are super friendly and I don't feel like I'm a weirdo walking in there covered in tattoos with, my band t-shirt on. Right. And you have good tattoos. You have many. I do. I like them.
Yeah, we'll have to get a picture of those on the site.
I'm not getting the SellerSmile logo tattooed on my arm, guys. Sorry.
We'll keep working for it.
And so anyway, it's about making the customer feel comfortable, right? So my dad would feel the most awkward and out of place going into a Hot Topic because that is not his aesthetic. But he's not shopping there, so it doesn't matter. Whereas if he were to walk into a West Marine, which is a boating supply chain, that it's like an AutoZone, but for marina people who work with boats. If he walks in there, he can talk the talk and talk shop with them just fine. And of course, they're all a bunch of grungy old guys that, have been sailors for the majority of their lives. But I would feel super awkward in there. So it's all about this aesthetic, but to your customer. So know what you're selling and know your audience and how to make that particular audience based on what you're selling the most comfortable and the most likely to approach you.
Yes.
Yeah. And you bring up such an interesting point because it doesn't necessarily have to be this clean and groomed like aesthetic, or it can, like you mentioned, it has to be more about being on brand. And that's not just like the physical appearance. That is the physical appearance, the organization of the products. I remember and Lynn, you can speak to this as well. Whenever we worked at Peach Mac, there is a lot of focus on planograms, right? Like where your product should be physically placed in the store. And, there's a lot of focus on like, okay, what should go up above? What should go in the back? What should go, on this like very center aisle? Things like that, because the physical presentation of your agents and of your product makes such a big difference in this sort of proactive customer service.
Yes. And I guess a department store would be a perfect example of that because they separate it into departments, right? So not only do you have the people all looking well-dressed and professional and like they want to help you, but if I have a question about women's clothing, I'm not going to go to Home Goods. I'm going to go over to the women's department. So having things classified where they should be makes it easier on the customer to know where to go and whom to ask.
Great content on this. Interesting thought here is like, if you have any question about who you are, maybe the better question is, where am I comfortable? And maybe then I sort of fit that type of mold. The idea of proactive customer service, how things look, smell, feel, before you even decide to buy has a lot to do with probably the success of the brand. Guys, let's talk about face-to-face interaction. Michael and I have been taught this idea from previous mentors and role models that the best way to communicate with anyone, especially team, is face-to-face. But that's not something that you really get nowadays in e-commerce customer service. So what's unique about face-to-face interaction when it comes to brick and mortar, and why does that matter?
Well, the fact that you can talk to someone face-to-face, I mean, the ability to read a person. So body language is a huge factor in communication. Like a smile goes a long way. Everybody knows that. I will never forget, I had a really hard time making friends when I was a child. And it's because I refused to make eye contact and I refused to smile at anybody. My mother took me, I was a part of 4-H because we had horses and lots of riding and all the 4-H kids rode. She took me to my first 4-H group and I hated it. And she's like, I dare you to make eye contact with one person and smile at them. And I guarantee you'll make a friend. And I thought she was insane because I was like 10. And so I did. I tried it. I looked up across the table and I made eye contact and I smiled at a girl. And next thing you know, I had my best friend for the next 4 years.
That's an amazing story.
Yeah. And her name was Sarah and we rode horses together and it was great. But it's amazing just the nonverbal communication that comes with a face-to-face interaction and how that can completely change the tone of a bad situation. By not crossing your arms over your chest shows that you are closed off to that interaction. By making eye contact versus not making eye contact, from physically handing a product to a customer versus just kind of waving them in the direction or walking them through the store to where it is that they need to be.
And I remember like a part of a lot of training at these retail stores that we've worked at, including like Peach Mac, for example, there is a focus on, if this person is interested in this product and they obviously kind of are interested in how it feels, how it works, take it out and put it in their hands, right? It goes again into experiential marketing that we were just talking about, but it starts with that face-to-face interaction. That's probably hands down the biggest advantage that brick-and-mortar customer service offers over an e-commerce customer service experience.
Certainly. There's all these nuances to that physical interaction where I feel these social pressures build up and these things that are just understood that sort of coerce you into making a decision. I think there's more of a compelling reason to make a purchase when you're in person than maybe when you're not. Of course, Lynn, before the call, brought up the idea that, well, not always. You could have maybe even more of a negative situation occur when it's in person. And certainly I think that's the case too. But I guess the main point is that there's more power in a face-to-face interaction that could be for the better or for the worse.
I was just going to say that's a great way of putting it. There is more power in an interaction, either positive or negative. I can't tell you how many times I've had to catch myself before I rolled my eyes at a customer. And when I'm behind a computer screen, it doesn't matter if I roll my eyes. If I am physically standing there looking at them and they told me they don't believe in vaccinating their dogs or cats or something I disagree with, and I roll my eyes or huff or otherwise give some sort of sign of my disapproval or frustration, the whole thing can turn sour in an instant.
I remember when I was a store manager at an Apple Premier store, I had a customer come to me and say, yeah, this person on your team just rolled their eyes at me and, why do you have these people on your team, all this stuff. And I remember afterwards I approached them and I was like, I didn't roll my eyes. They must have misinterpreted my body language. So it's this interesting thing where it can be both a very positive thing and something that can add extra pressure on the interaction.
Another unique aspect of brick and mortar is that there's sort of this exclusivity of attention, right? You're in their store. And for the most part, any sale in their store is going to be good for them. It's a little bit more difficult for that shopper to maybe browse or make a purchase from the competitor. Do you guys have experience when someone comes into one of these premier Apple retail stores? Is it difficult for them to walk out and look for the product somewhere else?
It does kind of depend on your physical store's setup because some stores only sell their brand of items, but some of them sell multiple brands and they might have a higher cost of goods or like higher profit margins on some. So they try to push those more. So it is like sometimes they are competing for their shoppers' attention in some aspects of their store, but in general, it just takes the customer physically leaving the store in order for them to possibly go to a competitor, right? So there's an automatic greater customer effort in switching to a competitor, something that is a big difference in comparison to e-commerce customer service.
So let's say I go into Nordstrom and I'm looking for, this actually happened to my father-in-law, I'm looking for a specific perfume or a perfume with a specific smell. And this is an example of Nordstrom's amazing customer service. He was looking for a specific scent And the associate was super sweet. She called over her manager and was like, hey, do we carry this? And the manager said no. And she's like, well, let me check and see if it's available at the store up the road. She checked, it wasn't available. So she checked online at Nordstrom.com. And it turns out Nordstrom just doesn't carry the scent. She had options there, right, for customer service. She had the option of telling my father-in-law, hey, we don't carry this, sorry, and sending him on his way. She had the option of saying, well, I know you're looking for this like floral scent. Why don't you try this one that we do carry, which is also a viable option. Or you could do what she did, which made the experience for him 5 million times better and why he continues to shop at Nordstrom to this day. She called around to Macy's, to Dillard's, to the other department stores that she thought might carry that perfume in the mall. And when she found one that had it, she said, hey, Mr. Zarcone is going to be coming over in the next 30 minutes. I'll tell him to ask for the associate's name. Would you guys put that aside for him so that he can just run in and grab it real quick for his wife? And they did. So he ran down to wherever it was. He bought that perfume from the competitor and came back and said, thank you so much for going out of your way to find this for me. And then he went to her manager and said, that girl was amazing. Thank you for the amazing customer service. And now they have a customer for life, but they didn't actually sell him anything in the store. So yes, it has to do with having the customer relegated to whatever products you have, but it also opens up that option for them to start the dialogue with you for alternatives and for you to go above and beyond for the customer to offer those alternatives. So if I went into PetSmart and I was looking for a specific food and I need that food tonight for my dog, I'm going to go up and I'm going to say, guys, I don't see any of this on the shelf. Do you have some in the back? They checked on the back shelf for me. They were like, no, we don't carry this. We've actually stopped carrying this food, but I can either recommend this food to get your dog through the night while we order some for you, or we'll price match Chewy.com or wherever the competitor is to get that for you. They want me to have the best experience, whether it's with them or not.
That's a great story. That just proves that great customer service transcends a store or a brand. People want to do business with people that make them feel that certain way. We didn't do a good job of making that distinction, I think, when we first had this discussion, because Michael, sort of like you brought up, let's say there's a Ford store. There's a certain feel about being in that physical store, but there are also Fords in dealership A, dealership B, dealership C. And Fords as a brand still want to stand out in those other stores. Different aspects of a physical location when considering shopping and customer experience in general.
It's almost as if even though you might have an exclusive attention with your shopper, showing them that you have their best intentions in mind, can make the difference.
Yes, that's exactly it. It's the best intention for the customer, whether or not it's with your store or with a competitor.
Best intention wins.
Best intention wins. And the customer can tell that, even with email or a phone call. It doesn't necessarily have to be face-to-face. That's definitely something that they share. Brick-and-mortar versus e-commerce customer service. If the customer opens that dialogue with you in e-commerce, because it's usually up to the customer to open that dialogue and say, hey, do you guys make this in a longer size or a different color? And say, no, we don't right now, but here's where you can find something similar, or we have this similar version, or here are all the options I can offer you to help you achieve what it is you're trying to achieve.
Next, we touched on how there's a difference in business hours between brick and mortar stores and e-commerce stores. That's interesting in and of the sense that the customer service that you receive, the experience you have, will be limited on certain days of the week or holidays. And I think we should cover that more in the future. But a more interesting topic, in my opinion, is the social pressure aspect of a brick and mortar store. That's a big distinction, I think, that doesn't exist at least so much on an e-commerce space. So think about social pressures of being in the same room with someone, in a conversation with someone. We talked about two different types of pressure that the buyer has or is under, and then the pressure that the store has or is under. So do you guys mind elaborating there?
Yeah. So from a buyer's perspective, and I think this is a part of what has made e-commerce so popular, is that you don't have to get out of your house if you don't want to, right? Like you can go ahead and make your purchase directly from the comfort of your own home. Meanwhile, if you go to a certain store, there might be this notion that if you walk into this store, you shouldn't just be checking things out. You shouldn't just be like doing research. A lot of people feel uncomfortable with that sort of experience, right? Like they feel this automatic pressure to buy something. And if they walk out of that store without anything, it feels, every time I do it, I always feel kind of weird. I feel like I did something wrong. When, in reality, I'm just trying to make an informed buying decision. So it's this awkward pressure on buyers to have to purchase. And, going back to the face-to-face interaction and some of that experiential marketing, some of the differences can even be like the sort of pressure that the store members give towards a buyer who walks in. I walk into stores where either they didn't give me any attention at all, or they gave me too much attention and wouldn't just let me shop. That makes a huge difference.
That does make a huge difference. And then I think it also has to do with, especially I personally find it very hard to not purchase something if I go into a small locally owned store that I'm trying to support, like a mom and pop shop. Also, I feel a lot more pressure to purchase something if I've taken up one of the customer representative time. So if I've sat there and quizzed them on things and we've talked about stuff and they've answered all of my questions and done a great job, I want to reward them by buying something, but what if I'm not ready yet? Whereas when I chat with somebody online, I can ask them all the same questions and they're like, is there anything else I can help you with today? And I can just say, no, thank you. And I'm doing great and log off. And I don't feel that pressure and that anxiety to make the sale, if you will.
I feel it as a sense of obligation, or I'm being offensive if I don't make the purchase in some cases. Related to this is a situation I'm sure many people have encountered where you're walking through usually a larger city and there are people that sometimes come up to you requesting money from you or food from you. And I didn't personally grow up in a situation where that was very common. So when I experience it and when I'm traveling, it's uncomfortable because I feel obligated that I should be giving in every situation and I don't want to say no. And maybe even I think of these excuses to say no. So I feel better for doing it. And then I just think about like, why am I twisting this? And it's really to make myself feel better about making the decision that I really want to make, but feeling bad for making it.
And it's almost uncertain, like going into certain stores might make you feel that way, and it's terrible that happens sometimes, but it's the truth and it's the reason why shoppers sometimes then decide to go online. One more thing to say about the types of social pressure that can occur is even from like the store's perspective, right? Being in the customer service role, Lynn and I both come from a store manager perspective, and there were so many times where we were brought into a situation that had escalated with someone who was really upset about something, and sometimes you just have to say no, or sometimes you'll feel extra pressure in providing the actual resolution that you can provide, right? And sometimes there's just not a great answer. There's not a great solution for this customer's issue. If you're in a face-to-face interaction, there's so much more pressure that goes into this. I'm sure everyone's like seen a horror story go on like at an actual store where someone's like freaking out about something. Hopefully that's something that happens less and less, but still it's something that can happen. And being in a physical store adds more of that pressure for your customer service representatives or your store managers.
Dealing with an upset customer face to face, the pressure to, one, make them be quiet and go away, but you also have to uphold your dignity and you have to stand up for your employee who's probably has nothing to do with it and is getting berated. And then you have to deal with, what are your store policies? Having that pressure of somebody yelling at your face or otherwise being upset at you and other people watching versus being able to do it behind a computer screen via email when you have time to think out your response. And if you need to, you can just shut them off. You just not respond to somebody being belligerent.
You can come back to that interaction at a later time.
Yeah.
This leads me to my last point about brick and mortar customer service. And again, coming from this perspective of a store manager, when you are training a new hire, there's all these scenarios you have to walk through, how to talk about this product, what their store policies are, what you should do when someone asks you certain questions, all this sort of thing. It's much more difficult for a new hire to jump right in. I've seen so many new hires come into working at a store and they just have the deer in the headlights look. And then the manager gets called over because, hey, I tried to ask this person about this and they didn't know what they were talking about. They have no idea. Can you help me? Right. And so there's this automatic like negative experience that can happen from that. But that just comes from the point of, because it's live interaction right then and there, as in e-commerce customer service, where you might be able to create a case and come back to it later, there's less reference material right at the get-go, and it creates for a much more of a challenging training scenario.
Well, a perfect example of that was this morning when we had that chat, right? We had an interaction and they were asking for very specific product questions. And one of my coworkers didn't know the answer, but I did. So we had a separate chat window going where I was sort of watching her chat and with the customer and was kind of coaching her on the back end, what to say, how to interact, what questions to ask, and how to get the most out of the interaction for the customer. The whole time she was freaking out. I was able to help that, and the customer didn't know the difference, didn't know that he was talking to someone who didn't know the product.
But that wouldn't have been the case in a face-to-face interaction. It would have transpired very differently.
Exactly. In a face-to-face interaction, she would have looked like a deer in the headlights, and I would have stepped in. There's no way of saving face to make her look better in that kind of situation, other than brushing it off as, oh, she's new, which you have to do sometimes when you're working in a store, or, oh, here, let me help you with this. And then the customer doesn't want to wait for you to like train through their interaction. It can be like a whole thing.
Interesting pressures on each side of the interaction when we're talking about brick and mortar. The buyer feels pressure. The store feels pressure sometimes in certain situations. Maybe that pressure doesn't exist, or it's at least different when it comes to e-commerce. So up until this point, we've been talking about the left side of the Venn diagram, the brick and mortar customer service. It still exists. It still occurs. It's not dead. It probably never will be. But at least what we're seeing now is a transition into the other side of the diagram. The right side is e-commerce customer service. This is when we're buying products online, shoppers and buyers are coming to us. They have needs. They need to make returns or exchanges. Michael and I started an agency a little over 2 years ago that specializes in e-commerce customer service. So Michael, introduce this topic. Why is it different? How is e-commerce different than brick and mortar when it comes to the customer experience, when it comes to the customer service?
So e-commerce customer service is the topic that's much more familiar with our listeners. And there's so much overlap between both subjects, which we'll cover in a few moments. But with e-commerce customer service, that encompasses everything that is not face-to-face, right? We were talking about how the face-to-face portion of, live brick and mortar customer service is probably one of its biggest strengths. But the inverse of that is one of the biggest strengths that e-commerce has, right? Is the ability to manage that sort of case offline, right? So that encompasses email, chat, phone support on your social media pages, maybe through a wall post, a Twitter, DM, Instagram comments. These are the different touch points of e-commerce customer service. And because we are missing that vital aspect of face-to-face customer service, that forces e-commerce businesses to make the most personalized experience possible, but online, right? So that's one of the major key aspects is how do you incorporate some of the positives of brick and mortar stores that people are still going to? How do you take some of that and apply it to your e-commerce business? One of the first advantages to that is the fact that your online store is up and running 24/7. A shopper can be up at 1 a.m. and decide, okay, I'm going to buy a pair of gloves. And they can go to your online store and buy the gloves at 1 a.m. That's something that you wouldn't be able to do at a brick and mortar store. That 24/7 aspect is one of the things that has made online e-commerce businesses through Amazon and through eBay and through their own websites really begin to boom.
Shopping 24/7 online is amazing from a customer standpoint. Like you said, Michael, it doesn't matter which shift I work, what time of day it is, if it's a holiday. I don't have to wait to go to the store that has the product that I'm looking for. As long as it's online for sale somewhere, I can make the purchase and get that whole process kicked off of delivery.
And the 24/7 aspect of it, like it's not just an e-commerce thing. Like, we mentioned Walmart earlier. Walmart is typically open at all hours of the day. But the difference here is that I can just have gotten home from work. I've had a long day. I maybe don't want to go out anywhere. I can still get the things that I needed to get online versus having to get ready, look somewhat presentable to go to this store, right? So it makes a really big difference. It's just part of automatically reducing customer effort by having this availability 24/7.
And that is certainly an interesting difference between Amazon and Walmart, right? You can shop both in person and online with Walmart. But Amazon, unless you're talking about their Go stores or any of their pop-up shops, for the most part, it's all e-commerce. So interesting that Walmart has that kind of dual approach.
Yeah, but the difference, the comparison is that Prime shipping, y'all, everybody loves Prime shipping. If you can wait 2 days, you can get it. And it saves you that time and hassle of going to the mall and trying to find a parking place and walking around. And heaven forbid you're incapable of doing that. You think about the customers or the clients that we've had with different medical supplies, and they can't necessarily, like, what if the drive to Walmart is an hour away, right? Driving all the way to Walmart to get something, finding a parking place, especially if you're like elderly or somehow disabled or something like that, and coming back. The joy of something like Amazon is that you can have it automatically shipped, right? Subscribe and save. That stuff is legit. And then you have Prime shipping, 2-day shipping. You have, and you can do it all from any point in time. The buttons, what are those called?
Oh, you mean the Amazon buttons?
Yeah. So like I have them for my laundry detergent and I just hit the button and it reorders it. Or Alexa. I say, hey, Alexa, I totally forgot to order dog food, right? Alexa, order Letty's dog food. And 2 days from now, usually 1 day, because we're in Atlanta and we have amazing distribution, I will have my dog food at my door, which means not lugging a 35-pound bag of dog food up 3 flights of stairs.
So the shopping is easier. It's all times of the day. And even if you choose to go with e-commerce and wait for the delivery, sometimes it's still a better experience. Another distinction when it comes to e-commerce and customer service is bargain hunting occurs a little bit differently. Instead of a brick and mortar case where your product is in competition with those in the same room or maybe even the same city, now we're talking about products all over the world that share the same platform. So how does that affect the shopping behavior and how you're able to interact with those shoppers and buyers?
Your product is literally up against the rest of the world. Your product might be situated in the middle of thousands of other similar products, so you're automatically competing for your shopper's attention. And it brings much more focus into the strategy and into differentiating your product among all these different brands and available choices. This is what we were talking about earlier, where at a physical store, you might have like the physical layout, the physical presentation kind of working to help push a certain type of product. But online, you have to use things such as like your images, your listing, the type of brand voice that you're using on your product. These are all things that are going to be helping you compete for your buyer's attention.
Sometimes I feel like you need to own and run a small social media agency to be able to be competitive with your products. Like Michael said, you're creating images, maybe even videos. You're maintaining several social media properties. These are all the common strategies in e-commerce to get visibility and attention. Whereas in the brick and mortar world, we are worried about shelf placement and the color and feel texture of boxes and packaging.
This can also be an advantage because if you do sell a very valuable, very high quality product, and you're able to prove that through your images, through your product content, this is all going to help you stand out even more. And I'll remember your brand and come back and purchase it over and over again. There's so many times where I've gone to a brick and mortar store. They had the type of product that I was looking for, but they had a limited selection on brands and none of them really stood out to me. So I left, right? And I didn't make my purchase. Meanwhile, in e-commerce, there's a higher chance that I will find what I want. And if your product is doing a good enough job at representing itself, I will walk out with your product in my cart.
When it comes to bargain hunting and deciding where to buy your product from, let's use dog food, for example, because you know I'm pet crazy. I buy Purina dog food for Letty, and I've got several options because it's a generic product, right? I've got several options of where to purchase that. I can go up to PetSmart, and usually those people are pretty nice. It's instant gratification, but I also have to lug a 35-pound bag of dog food up to my apartment, which is not fun. So I don't really want to shop brick and mortar for that particular product. Also, it's more expensive to buy it in store. And yes, they price match, but I still don't want to have to lug that 35-pound bag of dog food up the stairs. So my other options are to buy it online. So I look online. I look on Amazon. They've got a good price, but it's Amazon. Amazon is very, like, they have good customer service, but it's very generic. So then I go to someplace like Chewy.com. Anybody who has a pet knows Chewy and knows how amazing their e-commerce customer service is. I can call them, I can chat them, I can email them for whatever reason. I choose to buy my products from my pet products, a lot of them, for the cat, for the dog, toys, food, all of it, primarily from Chewy, because one, it's easier for me as a customer, and two, because I like them as people. Every time I've had to interact with a customer representative from Chewy, I have been happy. They have made the situation better.
We're going to be doing a deep dive on Chewy for sure in the future.
I love them. They're wonderful. So when it comes to bargain hunting, yes, they have, their price is the same as Amazon's, and I can get the same price at PetSmart because PetSmart owns Chewy.com. So they'll price match them. So I've got same price across the board, but my bargain hunting then goes to the next level, which is, where am I going to get the best support? Who do I want to support? I want to support the people who are really nice and seem to actually care about me.
So you're supporting them and they're supporting you. There's like two sources of support, maybe.
Exactly.
Or at a store, you might be trying to get the best bang for your buck. Online, you might still be doing the same thing, but because of the wide variety of options, you get to be a bit more picky, and you can make your choice maybe just based on literally, I just like this brand better. I like Chewy better, so I'm going to decide to go with them instead.
Mm-hmm.
Another unique aspect to e-commerce customer service is the communication. Think of brick-and-mortar, traditional brick-and-mortar, where most, if not all, the communication was done in person with a handshake. If you needed any service, had a question, you were there talking to the merchant or to the owner of that brand or company. How is that different today in an e-commerce landscape? How are stores and brands interacting with their shoppers and buyers?
So I care a lot about communication. Communication is, to me, what makes customer service. Because I can say, hi, welcome to SellerSmile. What can I get for you today? Or how can I help you? Or I can say, hi, what do you want? And the communication is completely different. E-commerce customer service and brick-and-mortar customer service, communication is the overarching similarity between them. But how you communicate is completely different. People can read things like body language. They can see your facial expressions, your smile. They can get that sense of your tone of voice when you are talking to them in person. But when you are communicating through email, through chat, things like that, you have to rely on written language, grammar, diction, punctuation, all of that to get across that exact same tone, which can be really hard. So if you want to come across as casual and fun, there might be more exclamation points. There might be more casual conversational tone in your writing, but you can't be good at communicating in e-commerce if you can't write well. If you can't spell correctly, if you can't use punctuation correctly, if you can't communicate your ideas correctly. It's one thing when I go into a store and say, hey, I need this. And the customer representative is right there and can ask you all of those questions, right? And it's all in the moment. Whereas if I'm online and I chat and they have to keep asking me the same questions and I have to keep typing out my answers, and the point is not getting across because I don't know how to describe what it is I'm looking for, or they don't know how to ask the right questions, these open-ended questions to get the most out of my answers from me as the customer.
So being that a lot of e-commerce communication happens through a written format, that does put more pressure on having efficient communication, but that can also be a positive. That can be an upside to it because you have the ability to make your interactions more concise and direct. So, for example, there's this concept in online customer service called first contact resolution rate. And that is how often you can resolve a customer's issue within one email. the focus isn't so much in, I want to get this person to go away as quickly as possible. The focus is more that through using concise language, through using a helpful answer, doing your research, asking these questions ahead of time, you have the ability to help this customer a lot faster and in a lot more of an efficient manner, because you can answer all their questions through one email or through one chat versus having to go back and forth or possibly getting sidetracked with an entire conversation, that sort of thing.
Another thing that you won't find so often in a brick and mortar setting is extensive written material, something to reference, maybe that's published by the brand or by the store that explains their products, whether that's the features and the specifications to help you make a purchasing decision, or maybe that's a troubleshooting guide. So when something goes wrong or when you think something has gone wrong, how to fix it yourself or what to do next. So talk about some of the ways where the e-commerce realm has different type of reference material, and how do customer service teams interact with it?
If you don't know something, you can put them on hold and go find out and then come back to them. And then we can document it for everyone on the team to see. So one of my particular strengths as a process design lead is designing those processes to do exactly that, to create that reference material so that everybody has it in the future. We learn from our mistakes, and it isn't passed by word of mouth or by making the same mistake twice. We learn from it, we document it, and now everybody has that situation. So when somebody emails me asking about returning a product because they found a specific defect, I can reference my SOPs, my standard operating procedures, and be able to go back and handle that customer interaction efficiently and to the best of my ability in getting the problem fixed for them, because I have extensive reference materials. Or if I don't know what it is they're looking for, especially when it comes to medical supplies or something to that effect, where they're asking for a specific part for something and I know nothing about the product, I can do a quick Google search. I mean, it's always worth a Google. And then I can come back to them and say, you know what, I think you need this, this, and this. Let me double check on that for you to confirm it, and I'll be right back. And I'll go do that, confirm it, either with the manufacturer, with my superior, somebody who knows the product, and I can come back and say, yep, that's what you need.
And it's what you were talking about earlier, Lynn, when you were mentioning it's almost like you have more behind the scenes time to answer a question, as it kind of like when you were coaching Lauda through the live chat earlier.
Correct. And I don't have to worry about somebody being available, right? So one of the things that I've found in brick and mortar stores is there will be somebody who knows the product, but if they're on the phone or busy with another customer, myself and my customer are left waiting for that person to finish up in order to help us. With this reference material, with creating these SOPs that we have digitized for the entire team to use, all of that material is already out there.
It's almost like we get to spread the knowledge to a wider crowd.
Exactly.
And on the flip side of that, not just for your support agents, but also for your customers, right? You can have things such as forums. You can have things as like a self-service knowledge base where all this information that you've begun to accumulate from common questions or common FAQs that your buyers have, this can all go into a knowledge base or a forum that you can easily maintain and you can easily use as a proactive reference tool for your customers.
It's kind of funny. I was talking with a colleague, and there was this experience where they go into a brick and mortar store, and then the first thing they do is take out their phone and read the online reviews for it and see the price, what does it cost maybe from other sellers or other stores. So the modern shopper is using this digitized reference material on your product to make a shopping decision, even sometimes when they're in your own store. Now, guys, we already talked about how one of the unique aspects of a brick and mortar situation is there's more social pressure. We don't feel as much social pressure. At least we agree that there's much less pressure when you're browsing online. Why is that? What is sort of protective or different about that online e-commerce experience that's unique to e-commerce that makes it easier in that situation?
For me, I think that buyers online get to make their own buying decision. So they get to come to their own conclusion on what product is going to work best for them. So when they do end up purchasing, they feel much more satisfied about what they've done because you weren't pressured into buying a certain brand or a certain product, which then turns out, didn't really work for you. Being able to come to your own conclusion online, being able to compare product reviews and things of that nature, that helps me make an informed buying decision.
I make a better buying decision because I'm not making it for reasons that are ulterior to the product or my desire for the product. In other words, I'm not doing them to make the sales associate happy.
It also has to do with impulse control. I'm terrible about impulse control. I can go on a shopping spree on Amazon and put stuff in my cart, and then I'll go back and I'll look at my cart and I'll look at the total and be like, oh, snap. I shouldn't buy that. And I'll save it for later because I don't need it right now. And then I'll come back to it in a week and I'll see it, or my husband will see it and be like, why is this in the save for later? I'll be like, oh, I don't need that. You can delete it. Whereas whenever TJ Maxx, y'all, TJ Maxx is literally the worst. I go into TJ Maxx and I grab a cart and I go through that store and everything is like $5, $6 here, $10 here, $20 here. I get to the register and I feel really bad if I have to put things back. So there's that social pressure. And I end up walking out having spent $200-$300 because one, it's all instant gratification. It's impulse. And I can't put it away when I get up to the counter, right? It's not as much as clicking delete. It's going and putting that back on the shelf or handing it to the associate and saying, just kidding, I don't want that.
That's a much different situation. I feel like a visceral kind of embarrassment for that person. It looks like either they weren't smart or they couldn't afford it, but there's something that doesn't look appealing about that.
No, it's super embarrassing.
And for me, it's almost the opposite because when I'm shopping online, I am just adding to cart and I don't realize the amount of stuff that I have in my cart until the end. And at this point, I've decided, okay, these are the things that I need. So I need to go ahead and complete my purchase. Versus if I'm at a brick and mortar store, I'm physically seeing the things that I'm putting into my cart. So I can very quickly decide, never mind. I don't think I need this. I can put it right back, right? But again, it goes back to that social pressure of being in a brick and mortar store versus being online. There's pros and cons to both, but being able to provide helpful information about your product, making your product stand out, these are things that can work as a proactive customer service tool because it helps your buyers make an informed buying decision faster.
Yep. It's much harder to hand over that money when they're dollar bills versus numbers on a screen. Guys, let's transition to the final part of the episode. So we've covered the left part of the Venn diagram, brick and mortar customer service. We've talked about unique aspects there. We've talked about how e-commerce customer service and customer experience is unique and how to approach and think about that. Now let's talk about where these two circles overlap. We spent some time brainstorming the similarities between brick and mortar and e-commerce customer service. The first one that we thought was significant enough to bring up first was tone and language. In other words, both of these situations share the fact that tone and language is important. Let's talk a little bit more about that.
Oh, I have so much. As if you haven't gotten the idea already from this episode, I have intense feelings about language and tone. Language and tone in dealing with a customer interaction, whether it's in person or whether it's virtual, makes 1000% of the difference because it's all human interaction, right? The human interaction, we want to be a positive one. How do you exemplify positivity? How do you show that you really want to help somebody? They may not get what they want product-wise, but if you can make them feel good about themselves, they would be willing to forgive and forget. Right? If you start a conversation and you have a chatty tone, or if you understand the seriousness of the situation and become solemn and understanding by adjusting your tone and your language to fit the situation, it makes a difference. To put it into perspective, in the veterinary world, I literally would have to go from a room with a new kitten that a couple has gotten, and everything is happy and bouncy, and I'm talking to them, I'm talking their ears off about how to raise this kitten right, how to take best care of it, best practices. Please call me, email me, call the clinic, call your doctor if you have any questions. We want to be here for you. Everything is upbeat and happy and there's smiles. I could literally walk out of that room and into a euthanasia in the next. I can go from being happy and smiley because adorable baby kittens and puppies to having to comfort someone while they're saying goodbye to their beloved animal of 10, 15, 20 years. So the tone and the language that I use, I can't translate it. You have to be able to turn it on and off. I go from the happy-go-lucky to solemn and respectful. I never reach out to touch them unless they reach out first. Or if I ask, may I give you a hug? I encourage them to talk about their wonderful memories of their pet. Or if they don't want to talk, I simply stand in silence with them. So being able to read the customer and being able to address the situation appropriately. The same thing goes from the veterinary world over to the regular retail world. I did the same thing in brick-and-mortar management of a retail store where I was talking to somebody buying their first computer for college. And it's like, oh, you're going to go get that art degree? Well, here's the Mac you're going to need. You're going to need this RAM, this processor. Let's make sure you get AppleCare on this because we know you're going to spill that margarita on it, girl. To to switching over to the customer who is crying because she did spill that margarita on it and she didn't back it up. So now she has generations of photos lost, or that video of that pet that she just lost, and that was the only copy of that video that she had. Or someone who is super angry because we weren't able to fix their problem under warranty or something to that effect. So knowing I can't just bounce over to those customers and go from happy to happy again. I have to be able to address each individual situation with the appropriate tone.
And this is something that's shared across both online and brick and mortar stores, in that tone and language is important for every single interaction. If you've done customer service before, you've likely have dealt with this sort of like up and down sort of scenario. Lynn put it perfectly earlier when we were putting together the outline. She said, you have to be 100% extra aware of your tone, language, and communication with your customer.
Especially when you're writing it. I don't know about any of you or any of our listeners, but I can say okay or K in a text message, and my husband will take it the wrong way. He knows I don't mean it in any sort of sassy or disgruntled way, but a completely innocent sentence in one state of mind that you're putting out, you're typing up one completely innocent sentence, but it is read in their tone, not in yours.
Right. There's more ambiguity in the text versus if you were to say those or speak those words to him, your face, your tone, your volume all would insinuate that it's okay. It's okay. It's not okay.
Exactly. Fine. Yeah. Fine is another one. Mm-hmm. You text fine and I could be saying, okay, fine. Or it could be like, fine. You don't hear that tone of voice in a text format. So you have to be sure to elaborate on that. Say, dear Russell, that's great. I'd be more than happy to help you with that. Or, hey, Russell, it's okay that you can't get it to us! Exclamation point. I love my exclamation points. Everybody knows that. But, make sure that when you are writing to your customer, you add enough detail to make sure, and proper punctuation, to make sure that they understand that they read it in your tone and not theirs, especially if they're angry.
At Chick-fil-A, one of their training components is they say, speak enthusiastically, right? So in the case where, someone's excited and wants to learn about your product, make sure to convey that in your e-commerce emails, customer service emails, the use of exclamation points when it's necessary, right? Being able to match that customer's tone will make the difference.
Or use casual phrases. So instead of always saying, hello, Russell, say, hey there, Russell, or how are you doing today, Russell, or something to that effect. Right? That's more casual. It's more conversational.
Exactly.
I want to have a conversation with somebody. I don't want to have a conversation with a robot.
Exactly. And one last thing we'll say about tone and language is we've plugged them before, but download Grammarly. It's literally a free Chrome extension. If you're not using that for your emails and your messaging, if you're an English teacher, you don't have to use it. Fine. But if you're not an English teacher like myself, I make a lot of mistakes. I have to get corrected constantly. I use Grammarly, and sometimes Lynn corrects me a lot as well. But this is an easy way to make sure that your tone in your language is accurate, it's comprehensive, and that your customers understand what you're trying to say.
Tone and language, it's one of the shared characteristics between brick and mortar and e-commerce customer service. That means it matters in both. How you implement that tone and language and how you communicate it will differ slightly depending on the medium, if it's phone or text or in person. But the similarity they share is that tone and language matter to provide great customer service. The next and final most important similarity between e-commerce customer service and brick and mortar customer service is that across the board, we see that customers are willing to pay more for a better experience. When they have a better time, when they're happier and not sad, when they're impressed and not disappointed, typically that's fertile grounds for them to pay more, to make more purchases, to come back and pay more in the future. We call this the lifetime value of the customer. Guys, take it away. Why do you think customers pay more for a better experience?
Well, we looked up a recent study and we found that 86% of buyers say they are willing to pay more for a better customer experience. And I think that's just kind of indicative of, again, we've seen how the rise of e-commerce is kind of proof of that, right? In reducing customer effort by being able to shop from the comfort of your own home, people are more willing to come and pay more for it. We literally pay for Amazon Prime, right? That's because it gets it to me faster. And I have all these extra cool things. So the better experience will always win, whether that comes from a brick and mortar store, whether that comes from an online website, whether it comes from your product in the midst of all these other Amazon products, the better experience will win.
I 100% agree. And I'd like to add that it depends on the person too. So that exceptional customer service and experience when purchasing a product for someone with extreme crippling social anxiety would be online, would be somewhere where they don't have to talk to people. They don't have to go outside and get something. They don't have to ask any questions. And if they do ask questions, it's over super quickly and they don't actually have to talk to anybody. But for people like me who are super interactive and animated and love to talk to people, I like going into other stores and having entire conversations.
Yeah, I know friends who would literally go to GameStop just to geek out about other games with them.
Exactly. To me, it depends on if you're looking for something super quick and simple, it just depends on what you are as a person, who you are as a person, and what great customer service means to you. Whether that's taking a lot of extra time to go over every option available, or whether you want just a quick in or out, like my dad, for instance, who wants to go in, get something, get out. Like, don't ask him any questions. He knows what he wants. He's done the research beforehand. It completely is different per person. So as sellers and as people who are delivering that customer service, we just have to gauge each person individually and give them the best option for them as an individual person as possible.
Yeah, it's what you touched on earlier, Lynn. And it's essentially starting with your customer and then working backwards from there, finding what they find important, being able to make that a part of your day-to-day customer service policies and interactions, and really just making it all about them. That's what's going to make the difference, whether you're in brick and mortar or you're in e-commerce.
Consider your customer experience. How does that play a role in the success of your brand or your business? And how are you making people smile? How are you making people have this positive reaction towards you? Are you making them feel appreciated and special? All those things matter. In this part 1, we've compared and contrasted brick and mortar customer service with e-commerce customer service. They have distinctions, but the similarities they share are important to consider because learning those lessons, learning where they overlap can help us to reinvent the way that we do customer service and the way brands think about their entire customer experience from beginning to end. Tune in to our next episode, part 2, where we'll break down why shoppers choose one over the other. That's if they choose to shop in brick and mortar versus online. And we'll detail that process and how you as an e-commerce merchant can position your store to take advantage of some of those preferences. If you have a question or topic you'd like us to cover, you can send that to keepsmiling@sellersmile.com. And Lynn, why don't you read today's quote?
So originally I was going to quote Steve Jobs because Steve Jobs is the light of my life. May he rest in peace in heaven where he belongs. However, I think I actually have a different quote that I would like. from Mary Kay Ash, the founder of Mary Kay Cosmetics, because I think it really resonates with our topic today. And the quote is, "I have learned to imagine an invisible sign around each person's neck that says, 'Make me feel important.'" I think that the ultimate customer service standpoint, no matter whether it's brick and mortar, e-commerce, virtual or face-to-face, is to make that person feel important.
Excellent quote and wise words from Mary Kay.
Make me feel important. Yeah, powerful. And that sounds like what the name of that overlapping segment of the diagram should be. It's definitely something they both share and what sellers need to consider when creating their experience.
To find the show notes, which includes links to articles and resources we discussed, go to sellersmile.com/009. And if you found this conversation valuable, hit subscribe and you'll get the next episode straight to your device. Thanks again, and always keep smiling.